Here we are with an episode of the Groundswell Marketing Podcast, and we have paddling into one of the biggest waves of marketing is the godfather of content marketing, the one and only Joe Pulizzi. Did I
You
pronounce
even
your name
said
correctly?
that perfectly. How did you do that? Most
Pulizzi?
people do not get the last name right, and you nailed
Here's
it.
here's what I did. I spelled it out
Oh, so
and
good.
I repeated it because I'm known for missing some of the pronunciations, and so I wanted to nail it with you. So
It's so good. Yeah, it's interesting. Whenever I'm on a podcast or whatever interview from overseas, they always get it right. But anything from America, always wrong. It's
what do they
usually
call you?
Paloozy, which is
Pulizzi?
weird. They transpose the I and the U,
Oh,
which
right.
your listeners right now care nothing about.
They don't, but they care about you. That's all that matters. So you've been like you have built up this incredible content, I'll call it empire with the Content Marketing Institute and all the things that you're doing, and you just went and disappeared for a while. What'd you do?
I did. It's crazy. So my wife and I owned Content Marketing Institute. So basically, the CMI started in or around the year 2007. Formally became CMI in 2010, and we retained ownership all the way through 2016. Sold it. I stayed on until 17, and I took 2018 off entirely. I just took a sabbatical year. I wrote a pretty good blog post about it because it was probably up to that point the best year of my life. Just being able to say I'm getting up and I'm going to live in the present. I'm going to spend time with my kids before they go off to college and spend time with my wife and just do all the things I've never had a chance to do. So we did crazy. Like I went to Sicily with my dad. He'd always wanted to go to the home country, and so he got a chance to do that. And I met 60 of my cousins I didn't even know
Oh my
existed.
gosh.
So it was
Yeah.
crazy things like that. And then I'm like, I wanted to challenge myself, and I got this idea of writing a novel. And really, what it came down to is my wife, who worked for CMI but is not a marketer, she ran operations. She's
Mhm.
actually a social worker by trade. And she never read any of my previous 5 marketing books, except for the acknowledgments. She would read the acknowledgments and she'd say, okay, well, what did he write about me? And that's it. And I was like, I would really like her to read something of mine. And she loves mysteries and thrillers. So I said, okay, let me give this a shot. So I started tinkering around, wrote it, and then 2019 I wrote my first novel. It's a thriller called The Will to Die. It actually stars a marketing agency guy in the lead character. You
Mhm.
don't hear about that too often.
Did you get
And
taken out?
no, he kept it. Well, almost, it was close. It was a close call.
Yeah.
And then March of 2020 released the book, did the book launch, did the whole thing, made some bestseller lists. It was great. And then of course, a week later, the world shuts down.
Hmm.
And I'm like, okay, this is weird. This whole thing, like, what am I going to do now? What's my next chapter? And I started to get people messaging me about just marketing stuff, and mostly about Content Inc., which was my book from 2015, which I just rewrote. They
Epic
want
book.
to say, yeah, how do I build a business model regarding, around this content marketing thing? What are the revenue types? What's the consistency model? How do I create my own point of view? Whatever the case is. And I'm like, okay, maybe I can add more value on the content side than just writing another thriller, which is what I was going to do, Scott. So I'm like, okay, let's
By the way,
just
did your
pack it
wife
in.
read it?
What's that?
Did your wife read it?
She did read it, and she
Oh,
actually, that's the reason why I published it.
well, that's love. You did it for her.
Because she actually she read it, she liked it, she said this is actually good. I'm like, really? I mean, you don't have to say that. It's okay. We'll stay married. It's not going to be a big deal. But she said, no, I really like it. And then I went out to a professional editor. Had a lot of people review it, and I feel really good about it. I mean, I enjoy it. I enjoy going through it as well. So it's a fun read if you like mysteries and thrillers. But then, yeah, so then the pandemic happened, and then I just shifted focuses again, and now I'm
Mhm.
focused on this, this content creator, content entrepreneur uh, person that's trying to build a business through content creation and build a sustainable financial model, which is really what started a new company called The Tilt, and now I'm doing that. So I'm sort of back in. They keep pulling. You said Godfather, they keep pulling me back in to
Yeah,
this
it's like a
content
mafia. You
thing,
can't
and
get out, man.
and here I am. Oh yeah, once you get in the business, it's
So the
hard to make it
Tilt,
out.
I love that name. And I know a little. I was reading a little bit about its origin story. Maybe you want to share that a little bit because I think that gives us a little reference of some of the things we can talk about.
Yeah, I mean so in 2015 wrote the first edition of Content Inc. the book, and the second stage of the process is the content tilt. First stage is sweet spot. What's my expertise area? What's my audience's desire? Okay, that comes together in some kind of topical area, and then that's not enough. And so, what is enough? You have to find a content tilt, which is your area of differentiation where there's little or no competition on the web, where you have a chance to break through and actually build an audience. So, that's what we call the content tilt. The origination of that is I'm a big Matrix fan, just the first movie, not the second or third. But I love the part. So, if you know the part where Neo, Keanu Reeves' character, goes in and there's the small boy there that's bending spoons. And the boy's there and he's bending spoons right before Neo's supposed to see the Oracle. And Neo can't get it, can't figure out, why this little boy can bend these spoons. And the little boy said, there is no spoon. You have to imagine this is not, the spoon isn't here. And I remember this part, and this just hit me because then I wrote about it quickly, because Neo looks at the spoon and tilts his head, and then the spoon tilts with him. And that's how I try to explain the content tilt to people, because I'm like, look at your area, look at your content area, and you have to tilt your head a little bit and look at it from a different perspective in order to create something that's unique. That's somebody that will want to follow. Maybe it's a different platform. Maybe it is a different point of view. What are you doing differently? Maybe it's an audience that hasn't heard about. It's such a niche audience that nobody's ever talked to this niche audience in such an amazing, relevant way. So that's where I, focus on the tilt. We call it the content tilt. And of course, now the business is called the tilt. Yeah, I
So
like it because,
when I read that, I was like tripping out because I thought it was so cool because I have something similar. I call it the milk run. So I used to do content marketing around heli skiing. I started heli skiing Canada and was marketing the industry. And when we would sometimes get in a choke where there'd be lots of people skiing and we wanted to get some fresh tracks, basically one of the guides that was, kind of coaching me goes, well, if you kind of get speed and then you just go in from a different angle, everybody's looking at it straight down and they can't see all the lines and they're missing all the milk run. They go milking the perfect powder runs. If you go off to the side and look at a slightly different angle, you
oh, that's
find it opens
great.
up. And it's true. And so when I was like, ripping tree in the Powell with like lots of people, I could always get these milky runs because everyone was just so focused on the same direction. And so I call it the milk run. So when I read that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I say to people. The same thing. I call it the milk run.
I love
So
that. That's beautiful. And but you need those references because people don't get it. They're like, oh, I want to talk about, what's your area of focus? Oh, we're talking about cloud computing.
mhm.
For enterprise IT professionals. I'm like, okay, well, that hasn't been done 17,000 times. Like, there's no way you're going to build an audience and monetize that audience by talking about the same thing in the same way, especially when you're up against Amazon and Oracle and IBM and they're talking about the same stuff. It can't happen. So people get frustrated and say, content marketing doesn't work. And I just say, you're doing it wrong. You're
Right.
doing it wrong. And you're right at the beginning stages before you even develop the content. You have to focus. This is the strategic part. You actually have to think about this a little bit.
There was this great tweet during, I think about a month after March 2020. It's by copywriter Laura Belgray. I don't know if you know who she is.
Mm-mm.
And she's got the copywriting cure course and stuff. And anyways, her tweet was super fun. It was like, we need to flatten the curve on free, helpful information because everybody was just like loading it up, thinking that's exactly what you need to do. And it sort of speaks a little bit to this rush of, well, everybody else is doing it, or it, I'm going to just provide something free. It's not enough. It's actually the differentiation of the content, but it's more than that. I think that what your take on it is, what it's like, how can somebody look at this and stand above the crowd?
Yep.
It's like that was just like a moment where going, oh, if everybody just threw up their hands and said we'll do it for free. It's just like, I think what's changing is that the competition for content is just continuing to rise, and you have to find a way. It's not about doing more content or necessarily having the most amazing content. Your take is a little different. What is that take that can help people sort of like understand how they can break through?
Yeah, I'll give you an example because I I used to, not anymore. So a couple years ago and before that, I did a lot of consulting, and we would go into these multi-billion dollar brands, and we would do not real content audits, but basic content audits. And what I mean by that is I would get the marketing executives into the same room, at least the ones that are in charge of content creation. And we'd just start to look at the content. We'd look at the blogs. I'd print out some things, and I'd have them read some emails and things like that. And we try to figure out, okay, who are we talking to and what's the content about? And I would say, look, can you be the leading informational expert on this topic to this group of people? And it's funny to get reactions, Scott, because they'd be like, oh, no, no, we can't. No, why? We wouldn't be that audacious to think so. And I would say, what are we doing then? What are you doing? Are you just wasting time? Because basically that's what we're doing. I'm like, okay, look at all this content you're creating. Look at all these emails you've been sending out. You've got these PDFs, you're doing these reports or whatever. And you're saying that we're not trying to create the best resource available to that audience at this moment in time? You better. So let's figure out how we do that. And that's where we get to really good conversations like, well, maybe we should stop fooling around with this Facebook group and take some of those resources over here and put in our email team. Things like that. Then you can
Mhm.
really get down to brass tacks and say, we're going to make some hard decisions so we can be the leading informational expert to that group of people. Or I would say we talk about different audiences. And I'm like, okay, well, right now you're trying to communicate to 6, 7 different audiences simultaneously. And what's that creating is a watered down piece of nothing. So you're wasting your customers' time. You're wasting your time. You'd be better off not even doing it and just advertising. And I would tell them that. And I'm the content marketing guy coming in and
Mhm.
saying, let's just not do content marketing unless you take it seriously. And then the last thing I'll say on it is, and we talked about this right before the show, is just on consistently delivering over a period of time. And we'll get a lot of companies coming in and say, oh, we've been doing this podcast, and it's been 5 months, and we haven't really seen any downloads that we're not getting our download numbers and whatever. And I'm like, well, okay, what expectations did you have after 5 months? And they say, oh, well, we expected to have 10,000 or 15,000 downloads. I'm like, why would that be? I mean, so basically 5 months, and that's just you're starting the first inning after 5 months.
Mhm.
You don't even really see, and we know this from the data that we've had, created over time and worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, and it takes about 12 to 18 months to build what Brian Clark calls a minimum viable audience. So you have enough of or maybe you say Kevin Kelly's 1,000 true fans, enough where you can actually monetize an audience and see some kind of return. So you're at 5 months. I'm like, and so it's these little things where people just don't understand how media works. And maybe it's because I grew up in publishing where you understand. And if you're starting a content brand, you know that you've got 3 years. You really got 3 years till you're going to make something. And that's why content marketing is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's an investment. You're building an amazing asset. But if you're only going to do it for a short period of time, you may not want to do it at all, is my take.
I that's one of the things that I loved about the message that you would repeat over listening to your podcast over the years and your book. And I think that part of the problem, from my point of view, is the whole 10x, this hyper growth hacking. I know that that word gets thrown around, and people have this expectation because it's marketed that you should be blowing up over right away. And in my book, one of my first chapters is called "Patience is the New Growth Hack," and it's because I believe that that is the game you need to play if you really intend to do it well. Otherwise, just do advertising, as you said. And I
Mm-hmm.
think there's such a pervasive amount of people out there that are, I'm posting content and I'm exhausted and it's not really working. And I don't think they understand it's the combination of the long game, but it's the differentiated long game that you're speaking of, this tilt.
Yeah.
Those two combinations are deadly awesome if you play it through, in my opinion, and I think yours. Is there any other elements that are significantly important to make it sustainable in terms of bringing the cost of content? Because I think a lot of people complain about content's great, but man, it's just like exhausting my resources.
I
Welcome to
think the
business.
one no, I think the one area I would say, because I know a lot of your listeners are on the agency side, corporate marketing side. This is what I usually tell them, and if you do it well, it works. I would say before you start creating any content for your audience that you're targeting, you should create an internal marketing program for your executives that hold the purse strings over your budget, because they won't understand. So a content marketing program, it's not a campaign. It falls outside of any campaign because you theoretically create it not to stop. Most
Right.
campaigns stop. And so you have a lot of people in the organization that don't understand that it takes a long time, and that after even 12 or 15 months, you might have some qualitative information. You might have people, readers and customers saying this is great and really helping them, but might not have enough for whatever ROI or KPIs you have. So you have to set this up. So I always say, okay, well, every week or every other week, you have to create a little package to these people so they understand what you're doing. And at the end, you almost have to share the dream with them and say, look, we're trying to build an asset. We believe that if our customers share the hypothesis, right? The hypothesis is if our customers engage in this information on an ongoing basis, we will create better customers. They will buy more. They will stay longer. What are they going to do? So you have to sell that to them and say, look, this is amazing. This will be amazing, but it takes time to do this. This is media. So, but instead of selling advertising or paid subscriptions, what we're trying to do is create a better customer. How do we do that? So, I mean, I learned that a long time ago. I mean, when they were going to kill our content marketing division at our traditional publishing company, I had to go talk to all the publishers in the company and say, look, this can really help you. It can help your bottom line, but it can also do all kinds of things that you're not thinking about right now. We can monetize this in 10 different ways. We're just not thinking about it like that. And this was back in 2002, 2003, when it was more called custom publishing at the time. So that's what I would say, Scott, is you have to clear the way if you're in an organization and their culture's not to think long term and it's all about the quarterly numbers. And that's where you also have an opportunity, because you are up against most organizations that are very short term. They're thinking about short term financials. They're thinking of leads, close those leads as fast as possible. And by the way, that's all fine. You have lots of programs and lots of product marketing that does those things. But then you have this thing over here that could be amazing, that could take us into a whole new area, we could understand that there's products and services that we could offer that we would never think of before, because we're starting to build these real close relationships with our audiences that nobody else is doing. So that's where I think the opportunity is at. So if you're a small business, if you're an entrepreneur, you're fine. You just know, you have your macaroni and cheese, your ramen noodles, and your bologna. It's going to take a while. You got to cut the expenses down to nothing. Those things need to happen, and it doesn't happen overnight. And then if you're a marketing manager, marketing director, content marketing director, you know that it's going to take some time. So you better start. If your content marketing program gets cut, it's probably because you didn't do a good enough job communicating internally, and somebody then just didn't understand it and said, "Oh, I'm done. We don't. What are you doing? We don't get it. Cut it, because we don't have whatever the KPI is. We don't have it."
Is there a KPI that you would say, hey, this would be a couple to pay attention to, like growth rate, retention, audience, participation? What would be the sort of the things that you would say, hey, these are probably good things to pay attention to, that you can go back to, your a little bit of a hyper concerned group around
Yep.
you, and give them the sort of the a little bit of like, there's something happening here. You got to trust
Yeah,
it.
I mean, no, it's really good. I mean, you have a lot of vanity metrics up front, right? It's like,
Hmm.
oh, hey, good, social media sharing, and we're starting to get found in search, which that's a little bit better than a vanity metric. So you've got those things to start. That's fantastic. Okay, well, what are the next level things? If you can start to figure out who that audience is, start talking to them. We call it setting up listening posts. This is what social media was meant for, right? We're doing customer service about our content. who are these people? Are these people our audience? Are these people our prospects? Get an idea, because you'll start with the hypothesis thinking, oh, we're targeting our customers, or we're going to target prospects that we want to be customers, but you don't know exactly. So then when you start to get the data, then you can start to share this and say, oh, I talked with Scott. Scott's originally from Canada, and this is started downloading or subscribe to our email newsletter, and now listens to our podcast. I mean, the thing that we found out early when Content Marketing Institute launched, we found out that those people that downloaded or read our blog and then also engaged in two other things. It could be our webinar program, our podcasts, our research program. They went to Content Marketing World. They subscribed to Chief Content Officer Magazine, whatever it was. The magic number for us was 3. We didn't know this until 2 years after we were doing the program, but we found out that if they were engaged in 3 things that we did, they were the most profitable customer that we could have. They spent more on everything. They had the best yield of any of our customers. So that's where we found out, oh, our best customers, what we want to do is we don't just want to stop at 1, get them signed up for the email newsletter. We want to keep taking them on this journey. And I talk about, wrapping your customers in content love like an octopus. You have got all these arms of content. It's like, I want to just wrap them and love them so much in all this content, because that creates our best customer. So whatever those are, I mean, if it's, I want first subscribers to my email, and then I want to see a good open rate, and then I want to ask questions in that email so they actually send stuff back to me, or I want downloads of this thing, or you listens and views and all those things. Those all add up. But at the end of the day, if I'm going through all the different things, I want email subscribers because I have the most control over email subscribers from a communication standpoint. And then once I get email subscribers, then I can monetize in many different ways. And that's kind of the granddaddy of them all. And that's where, if you're setting the vision in the organization, you could say, look at Arrow Electronics is a good example. Arrow Electronics, Fortune 119 company, electronics distribution company. I think they did $20 billion last year or something like that. Well, they have 52 different media brands in the B2B electronic space. They have 3 million opt-in subscribers to their content. And if I said, okay, somebody asked me, who's the largest media company in the B2B electronic space, I would say it's not a traditional media company, it's Arrow Electronics. And they've done this organically as well as through acquisition. But how do they monetize? Well, they monetize in all the ways we just talked about, and they also are profitable, directly profitable on each one of those brands. They sell advertising, they do content packages, they sell paid subscriptions and paid content just like a media company would, but then they also sell more products and services traditionally on the other side. So these are things where I don't think that you have a content marketer thinking about the fact that, oh, okay, well, I have the same business model as a New York Times. And I would say, yeah, you do. New York Times is the same business model as you from a content standpoint. But for some reason, we don't think about that. So I think, oh, you build this audience, and then you have all these direct ways to monetize, just like a media company would, paid subscriptions, sponsorship, events, whatever. And then on the outside, you have all these content marketing returns that you could have, where you're selling, oh, I want to sell more products, I want to sell more service, I want to create more loyal customers, I want to create better yield. So that's where I think the granddaddy is, and that's where you get to the Amazons and the Disneys, and they're already doing this with their content. Red Bull Media House is another one that's been doing this for a long time. But that's where we're trying to get companies to that level, because nobody's thinking about it in this way, where they can build an audience and then create entirely new business models on top of what they're doing. But we don't know yet, because we're thinking about, how do I get somebody to download this white paper, because I want to take that white paper lead and then get it to my sales team and then close that on what I'm already selling, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. But I think there's something more out there.
What you're describing is, is it fair to say that that's a more predictable, likely income or revenue stream? Because when you have subscribers and once you have this in place, there's, you're not just doing sales activations, meaning campaigns, and then, going out doing a campaign. It's like that rise and fall. Have you seen sort of more of a sustainable growth model in terms of revenue with this model?
Well, absolutely. And the reason is diversification of revenue. Just like, so think about it. You have a financial portfolio and you have all your money in one stock. Well, could be good, but could be horrible. Because if that one company goes out of business, which which by the way, when I was at my first company, all the employees with their 401ks had it all in the company stock, which at the time when I started was at $32 a share. And 3 years later, it was at 7 cents. So, not very good diversification. But if you would diversify, then if let's say a global worldwide pandemic happens, you're
Hypothetically.
yeah, you're a little bit more protected. So
Hmm.
as a business, not just market, I mean, we're talking about a business model, not just marketing, but I want to be protected because I would say, okay, well, I've got this audience and I've got paid subscriptions. I've got an event like HubSpot has Inbound or Salesforce has Dreamforce. Adobe's got their own conferences, so that's a big number. You've got advertising or sponsorship revenue. You're doing partnership deals on that. You may be selling books and ebooks and paid, whatever the case is. So those are all direct. Okay, great. I got 4 or 5 diversified revenue sources there. I'm also selling merchandise. I'm also doing an affiliate program. I'm also doing products that I never thought we would launch to this group of people. Services, now new consulting services. So what happens is, and this is where, I mean, this happened with Content Marketing Institute's model. We were generating 6, 7 different types of revenue. And even though we were purchased because the company that purchased us wanted our events division, they didn't realize all the other revenue that we had from training and from advertising in the magazine, which was actually a thing and still is a thing. And that we had, we're dabbling in an affiliate program that, we did have some paid membership models that we were testing out. So I love that model. And of course, if you're just doing this for marketing, you'd say maybe your number one revenue generation is I need to sell more product sales. Because we talk about sales, savings, or sunshine as sort of the big three from a content marketing standpoint. Am I driving more revenue? Am I saving the company money in some way through this content marketing effort? Or sunshine? Am I creating better customers? Those are the big three if you're talking about them. But then there's so much more to the business model. And that's what we're getting to. We're getting to more businesses thinking about looking at this. How did Red Bull Media House do it? And I say, well, they didn't start out as Red Bull Media House. They started as Red Bulletin Magazine. And it was a print magazine that started out as a Formula One race day magazine that happened to grow. And now you've got, now they're a sponsor of bands and they've got an amazing video and audio portfolio that wouldn't that they're selling rights to that you'd never think would be a thing. So it's just it's thinking differently about this as a business and not just about how do I get my next lead in.
Very interesting. You think differently on a couple levels that I think would a lot of people are upside down on this one point of view, and I think you and I share the same one. Let me explain. So when I had my agency for I was in the agency business for over 20 years. People would come to me with a product. They go, we need to market it, and it was like what was funny about it is like they would sometimes go and build this product, but they'd have no audience for it, and then they go, okay, we need to get an audience, and I'm like, this
Mm-hmm.
seems so backwards, right? And I loved when I really connected with your work when you're really talking about building an audience, and I call it building the audience before you need to, or
That's
like the
right.
Arabic proverb, dig a well before you're thirsty, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
why don't you do it in advance? So like you're asking me like how long have you doing this podcast? Well, I'm about to launch like my book, my courses, but I've been working at this for 3 years building audience. I didn't just jump out and do it, even though I technically could have. I wanted to build my audience, and so this model, I think for some people, they can't get their head around. And I think you have such a really great way to articulate this. Why is it so important and to build an audience versus the product? And what do you say to somebody that goes, well, we already have a company, we have products. How does that work for us?
Sure. I mean, you and I we both read our fair share of entrepreneurial success books, and one of my favorites, and it's a really good book. Peter Thiels, uh, zero to none. I forgot the name of the book. Anyways, Peter Thiel's book. You can go find it, and he talks about in that, hey, all you got to do is create a product like the world's never seen. and everything will be fine. And he's going out there, and he's an investor in Facebook. He's seen the unicorn. He knows what it's like. It's a very rare thing, but it happens. And then you look at the stats and you say, okay, well, most businesses start out fail. Way more than 50% fail in 3 years. I'm like, well, that's not good. And they're all starting product first. And that's where, and it's not that my wife and I were geniuses or anything. We just started building audience and then built the business model around that. And I'm like, oh my God, I think this is a better model. Like, isn't it better to just serve an audience and understand audience better than anyone else? And then as you build that audience will tell you what they want to buy, which is exactly how Content Marketing Institute came about. Because in our business model, there was nothing about starting an in-person event. But we had an audience of about 10,000 opt-in email subscribers. And I started to get, notes from them. Hey, Joe, is there a big industry content marketing event available? And I'd say, no, there's not. There's small workshops and things like that, and some virtual stuff, but no in person. And then finally somebody just said, well, are you starting one? Like, can you do that? And I'm like, well, sure, I never thought of that before. And then of course it becomes a $6 million event in 4 years. I didn't think that was going to be a thing. So for whatever reason, and right, because we all get, oh, here's our great product idea, or our products and features are better than anyone else, and we love our products. But who's to say that we might not have product market fit, and we've got to go out and find somebody to buy that. And that's where you get the marketing. I got to spend all this on marketing, and I got to interrupt people so they buy my product. But as you were saying, what if you flip the model? What if you just say, look, here's the audience we're targeting. Well, how do we become the leading expert so they rely on us? Well, we got to talk about this type of content, but we got to tilt it a little bit. So we talk about this, and then they want to actually subscribe to all our stuff. And we're going to start on one platform, and then we're going to do that for 9 months. And then we're going to keep growing and growing and growing. And then we just listen. So there is some risk to it because you don't know what they're going to ask for. But in all the cases, and we talk about 100 case studies in the Content Inc. book, it all happens the same way. They build the audience, and then they know that audience so well, they start launching all kinds of stuff. And then they're really well diversified because they got 3, 4, 5 different revenue types coming in. Very, very profitable, because usually these are not capital intensive businesses, which is another thing that people don't talk enough about, because you don't have a lot of upfront product development time because all you're doing is building an audience. Not that it does take some money to build an audience and market that, build the content, whatever. So that's the one answer to your question. The second thing is, okay, let's say you have products. You already have products and services. Like a really good example of this is, I don't know if you know Marcus Sheridan from River Pools and Spas. This is an old case study. So Marcus Sheridan, this is back in 2008. So you were going into the Great Recession, and Marcus and his company at River Pools, they installed fiberglass pools. And they're going under. They're like third in their market in the Virginia area. Their first 2 competitors just have way too much over them. And at the same time, people are canceling all their fiberglass pools because nobody's got any money. So he's got to give back $50,000 here and $20,000 here. It's like, oh my gosh, we're going to go under. And he said, well, what do I do? He said, well, if I become the world's leading expert in fiberglass pools, because I don't have advertising dollars, but if I just blog and I just tell people the truth and can build an audience around that, maybe that'll be a competitive advantage. So Marcus starts to do that, starts talking about benefits of fiberglass versus concrete pools, why you should or should not buy a fiberglass pool. He was the first one out there to put detailed pricing on fiberglass pools. Everybody wants to know that. He said, I'm going to tell them the truth. So he puts everything out there he possibly could. Well, what happens? Marcus gets a following, worldwide following about the whole thing. And he actually, 3 years later, becomes the largest seller of fiberglass pools in the country, not just in his market. Why? Because when anyone searches or wants to know who the leading expert is on fiberglass pools, River Pools comes up. It's like, okay, it worked out really well for him. Well, he just installed fiberglass pools. Is there anything more? Well, because of their notoriety, they started to manufacture fiberglass pools instead of just installing it. Now they're the world's leading expert in not only installation, but also in manufacturing of these pools. That would have never happened
It's
without an
like
audience.
reverse osmosis. Like you're kind of getting new innovation as a result of your audience, is what you're.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, Marcus would have never guessed that this was happening. So to your question about, okay, somebody has products and services, that's fine. Your goal, your hypothesis might be, if we build an audience in this area, we can sell more of our current product. Nothing wrong with that. That's fine. Or you want to keep your customers longer, or you want to have those same customers buy more stuff. Great. Those are all great marketing hypotheses. You should put that together. That will work. But what you'll learn is so many other opportunities that you never thought of before, and that's where I think you kind of have to do the field of dreams and believe a little bit that this is going to happen. It's easier for an entrepreneur to do that. We've seen it happen over and over and over again when you have a large enterprise, big marketing group. That's where you have to have the internal communication, because it's harder to sell this long-term vision of the great castle, and we can build this thing and it's going to be amazing. We know it's going to happen. It can happen, but it does take time.
Yeah, I think, businesses that actually like there's this one quote that was like it's sort of being I can't remember where it came from. You probably might recognize it. It was something like business would be great if it wasn't for customers. It's like they get in the way of everything, right? And I kind of look at the product centric thinking as being egocentric, and content marketing and audience centric is very empathetic centric, because you have
That's
to
right.
be very empathetic in order to attract, retain, and benefit from it, which can be uber profitable. But it's like different, because I think people that are just very transactional and they just go, I just want to pump product. I mean, content marketing probably isn't for them because they're not trying to build a relationship. And that's something I kind of see as sort of defining line when I've worked with people. It's kind of like, like you said, maybe the advertising's better for you. That's more transactional.
Yep.
It's really about, cost benefit. You're not thinking long term valuation, product innovation, stuff like that. So I don't know.
No, you're playing the long game, but
Yeah.
you know who else plays the long game? Amazon.
Oh,
I
geez. Do you
mean,
think?
yeah, it's funny. Well, the one that we haven't talked about this a bit, but what I love about Amazon, and a lot of people don't realize it, is that Amazon just sold books for 3 years,
Hmm.
right? They focused on becoming the best book seller. And this is where a lot of people go wrong, because if you look at most content marketing programs or campaigns or whatever you see out there, they usually start by throwing content all over the place. And that's the wrong way to do it. They'll say, "Oh, okay, we're going to do the podcast, and then we're going to do the blog, and we're going to do the research thing, and we're going to have the event, and we're going to do 8 other things." And if you look at CMI research, the average enterprise distributes content to one audience 14 to 16 different ways, which I'm not saying is necessarily wrong, but probably is, depending on where they're at,
Hmm.
because you just diversify too soon. Okay, well, what should you do? Look at the greatest media companies of our time. How did they start? New York Times focused on creating an amazing newspaper. Huffington Post, one amazing blog. Now they have 400. They just started about doing one thing well. Um, TED Talks, just we're just focusing on this 15 to 18-minute speech, and we want that's our thing. Red Bull, just the magazine. And then once they build a minimum viable audience, then they diversify. So you see this all the time. It's like, oh, we've got to be everywhere. And just because we can doesn't mean we should. And that's where you see so many people go wrong. And I'm like, okay, well, you only have so much, I call it content energy. You only have so much content energy
Hmm.
that you can't be great at 6
You've
different
diffused it.
things. Yeah.
It's like
You,
a
you,
laser beam. You can go deep. You can cut through anything. And if it's diffused, you're like, don't scratch the surface across the board.
Yeah, I mean, like when we get
Right.
together, and it really is. I feel bad when I go through and I'm talking to a marketing manager and they say, "How are we doing?" And I'm looking at everything and I'm like, "You are really mediocre in
Yeah.
in all these
They're
things."
spinning a bunch of plates.
Yes, and you'll
Right.
never be great at one thing. So basically, what I usually go in, and this is where this has been years ago, where people wouldn't expect. for me to come in, the content marketing guy, and I'm coming in and I'm saying, you need to stop producing so much content so many different ways. Let's focus on, instead of doing these 6 different things, let's have the most amazing podcast in our industry and the most incredible relevant e-newsletter. Just focus on that. And then when we build that audience, then you can diversify like a media company would. And now if you look at New York Times or Red Bull Media House or Huffington Post, they're doing 72 things because they
Mhm.
built that audience. And that audience then went with them, became greater audience, started sharing with more people, and now they've got multiple millions of subscribers, members, whatever the case is. So that's where I think a lot of people go wrong. It's like, oh yeah, we can create all this content. But then again, they forget that, well, when you're creating content to start, only about 30% goes into actually content creation. About 75% needs to go on marketing of the content because you have to treat it like a product.
Yeah,
Because
content activation. I think a lot of people think that content syndication is the way. So they take one piece of content, syndicate it everywhere, and think that that's somehow going to work without, number one, why would I subscribe across channel? Because I just saw the content here,
yeah.
and you're not really treating each channel uniquely. Like, for example, my background's been film. I had a film production company for years. I do editing, but yet I haven't done anything on YouTube. It's because I'm focused on the podcast. Exactly the same thing that you're talking about is going deep before I go wide. And what do you
So
say to
true.
somebody that's like, they're saying we got to be everywhere versus how do you decide where to be to make your content
Yeah.
activate?
It's so funny because you mentioned it. Look at Mr. Beast. So Mr. Beast or PewDiePie, like the big YouTubers out there. How did they do it? By delivering consistently over a long period of time, one channel to one audience. Okay. How did Joe Rogan do it? How did Joe Rogan create the Joe Rogan experience? Well, same thing, just on the podcast. And then said, oh, okay, well, let's add YouTube as a syndication opportunity. Okay, fine. But still, just focusing on the podcast. And then you go along and you look at all the great media examples of our time. Same way, they started one way. So when somebody comes to me and says, "Oh, I'm doing the TikTok, YouTube, Instagram thing," oh, I'm like, "All right, why? Why not? Why not pick one?" And by the way, I don't have a problem. I have some friends recently who've tried some things, and they say they know what they're doing. They say, "Look, we're gonna dabble in between, let's say, Instagram and TikTok. And we're going to see which one, and which one is like leaning more, then we're going to forget the one and go the other way." And I'm like,
That's
I
cool.
can live
That's
with
an
that.
experiment.
You're
Yeah.
you're experimenting because you don't know. Like I was very clear. I had a really good feeling when we started Content Marketing Institute that blogging was at that. I mean, it's 2007. That blogging was the way.
Mhm.
And then when we hit 2012, 13, I really felt that, okay, podcasting is then going to, and of course, takes months, but then we get enough feedback to know, okay, we're on the right track. People are talking about it's working. So yeah, you can absolutely test it out, but once you get that feeling, you need to really divert, because it when you see content creators and you're talking with content creators, they're not, they don't call themselves content creators. They call themselves bloggers, Twitch streamers, YouTubers, writers, right?
Mhm.
I mean, over whatever they think is their thing. And then once they become great at that one thing, then they diversify, like a Mr. Beast is doing right now, and he's going all over the place, or a PewDiePie did. But still, their main focus is on one channel. So I think it's just, if somebody comes back at me, Scott, and says, I want to do these 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 different platforms, I would just say, what data are you looking at that says that that's the right way to go? Because I haven't seen it. I haven't seen anyone come out of the gate and just become great, build audiences 4 or 5 different ways. Just It just doesn't work that way. It's almost impossible to understand not only that medium, but understand your audience in that medium, figure out your point of view, your content tilt, and then consistently deliver over a long period of time while you're marketing it like crazy in more traditional channels and leveraging your other channels that you've already built to promote your content that's not promoting your actual products and services. So you got enough to worry about.
Isn't that exactly how you and I started this conversation? When you came on, you're like, because I think you knew I never saw any videos of this podcast. You went, "Oh, is the video? Are we going to be recording video?" And I just made the decision. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going to record it because I've done only audio for the last 3 years." And it's like I think that's people that are work I can work with video, and there's a lot of content creators that because they can, they shouldn't necessarily.
Hmm.
It's like honing and getting kind of like narrow in your field. And I think that that's what cuts through the clutter. As you're saying, so I think that this is something that a lot of people are just confused on, and still having a presence across multiple channels and having their things, I think is cool. But I think what you're describing is like just own a channel and take it
Yep.
all the way home.
But
I just
it's a really good point you made. You could still like I'm not saying you shouldn't have a Twitter account
Yeah,
or that you
protect your
shouldn't be on
your
LinkedIn. I'm talking to
IP.
you about a very purposeful content program to a group of people that you're trying to build on that platform. So
Hmm.
you might say, "Oh, okay, I'm going to use," and this is like with me. I don't use LinkedIn to create any new content. Sometimes I'll share out some stuff I'm doing, but mostly I'll just post something that I think is interesting. Same thing for Twitter. It's like, okay, sometimes I'll promote my stuff on it, but most of the time I'm trying to come up with something interesting to say or reply on something. But I'm definitely purposeful about email, and I'm definitely purposeful about podcasts. That's my jam. That's where I'm focusing all of my energy and how I can be great at those two things right now. And everything else, I really just use them as listening posts. I'm trying to learn. I don't know. Is my audience there? Are they not? What are they challenged with? I may do a survey because I love free social channels. But again, I don't want to put too much into them because I'm building their platform for them. I have no rights. They can kick me off of their platform at any moment. So I'm going to use their platform to build mine, to build assets on email and podcasts where I have a little bit more control over it. So I don't think a lot of people
Oh,
realize that as
you hit
well.
a
Nothing wrong with
nerve
it.
there with me, man. That is probably one of my biggest things that I try to explain to people is that these platforms don't even have your interest at heart.
Nope.
If you look at over time what the audience I say built on Facebook, I can't even reach even a fraction of them anymore. And yet, I took the time to try to build that audience there and so forth. So, what do you say to people like the whole organic free social, call it free, like quote unquote free, free social versus paid? Like, what's content marketing's role? I think you've made it really clear about email, but in terms of syndicating and using social channels, what's your take on, is content marketing still relevant if all the social channels are slowly over time diluting with the algorithm, free organic
Yep.
content?
Maybe is my answer. They might be, but I want a backup plan.
Hmm.
So let's just say that you're all in on Facebook groups, which by the way, there's some really good Facebook group case studies in the Content Inc. book. I got no problem with it. They consistently delivered, in this case, video on Facebook groups, or they built a nice audience, whatever. But my thing is, okay, what's the plan when Facebook shuts that down or changes their rules or changes their algorithm, which by the way, they will, and because they always do.
Hmm.
But why would they change now? So I would just say, look, if you feel strongly, if you've got enough data, if you've got enough feel that you want to go to YouTube or Vimeo or Twitch or whatever, any of these other platforms that you don't control, I don't have a problem with it. But you always need a secondary strategy of how are you moving those people to something that ultimately you will have some control over. And I know you don't have full control. We don't control our audience, but you do have more control over your message, and you can't have people that opt into that message. So that's why, of course, that's why I love email. So I got no problem with social. Absolutely. If that's the case, if you want to make that case, do that. But know that tomorrow you might wake up and you might get booted off the platform. Or tomorrow Zuckerberg says, Facebook groups, they're done. Sort of like what LinkedIn did. LinkedIn
Hmm.
is totally killing their groups. And they have been for the last 2 years or whatever since Microsoft bought them. Fine. But all those, I
Anybody
know
remember
so
G
many people.
plus?
Yeah, I know so many people that were just their whole livelihood was based on, oh, I
Right.
got 300,000 members in my LinkedIn groups, and then they changed the rules and you can't even email those members anymore that you built.
I
Oh,
know.
well, because you built them for LinkedIn, not for you.
I'm literally in the middle of trying to coach a client who has their game is on creating community on the Facebook groups and going, what's your backup? And I think a lot of people are reluctant because they're kind of like already all in, and they're trying to figure out, well, how do I migrate? I did an interview with the founder of Mighty Networks, and she promises that you control all your data if you move your community here and your audience and stuff. And I think that this is the future for businesses, but they have to cross this chasm. What do you say to somebody to go the pain threshold of crossing this chasm? Like, not just the benefit. Do you have any strategies on helping get there? Because I think that's one of the biggest leaps that I have, anyways, with trying to help people, is getting them to really. I sell the sort of the idea, they get it logically, but they don't want to give up this easy path they have, and they think that it's somehow it's gonna fall apart, which you'll probably lose people trying to move one channel to the next. So, do you have
Yeah.
any ideas there?
Yeah. I mean, basically send them a link to Google Plus. I'm not
Totally,
kidding
right?
you. I'm
Yeah,
not kidding you. I worked.
I did a huge play in Google Plus,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
great.
I
Yeah,
worked with a really big client back in 13, 12, 13. We worked with a really big client who
yeah.
spent millions of dollars, millions on Google Plus.
Hmm.
They had something like 45,000 really, really engaged members. They were getting all kinds of great things. And then all of a sudden, Google says, we're going to close it down. And then they're hurrying. Oh my God, what's our secondary strategy? Whatever. Can we port these off? And what? So that's where I'm always saying, look, this stuff is going to happen. Do you think that Facebook groups is going to be a thing in 10 years? I don't know. I'm pretty confident that something akin to email will still be around because email has been around now for over 20 years. It's done fairly well. Audio communication. It's working really. This whole podcast thing. I don't know where it's going to go, but yeah, we always have to move. We don't know where it's going to go necessarily, but if you can build an opt-in audience member, you have a more opportunity to move that to something else in the future. Podcast or Facebook, TikTok, Instagram seems fleeting to me. You can, boy, if you miss something, you might lose them forever if you're not consistently publishing on a schedule. So yeah, I try to keep it real simple, Scott. I'm like, okay, well, it's happened a million times before. MySpace all the way on up, Clubhouse. I mean, I'm saying who knows what's going to happen, but I know a lot of people that right off the bat, and I thought I was bullish on it. I'm like, oh, maybe Clubhouse is going to be that thing. Whatever. Well, now you got Clubhouse, and now you got Twitter Spaces, and now you got whatever
Hmm.
Facebook is doing, and then you've got the whole Substack thing. Oh, then you've got Bulletin, and you've got Review, and you've got all these. Well, let's just not give all the power back to big tech every time, and let's think a little bit about, hey, would you really outsource your entire business to somebody? No, you probably would. You'd outsource some things. But would you outsource the strategy? Would you outsource all the people? No, you wouldn't. You have to keep some of that proprietary. You have IP. You have different things you want to think about. Well, if we just outsource everything onto these social media platforms, what are you doing?
Well, they own your business.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what they don't understand. Is they own your business. They control your business. That shift can be lights out for so many businesses. Clubhouse is interesting. I was really bullish on it too. I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time on there, but I immediately recognized how to get, like, you had to be thinking about how you're going to migrate people off, because there's no sustainable content. I was having great engagement, and I did lots of nice rooms over a long period of time. But that's the other thing. It was not very sustainable, because we had these great sessions. Like, we had Jay Bear on for like 4 hours. He told me that he's never been on anything for longer than an hour. And
Oh my
I'm like, we
gosh,
should have
that's
recorded
crazy.
that. And me and Brian Fans were like, he's like he does my podcast, and he's off like in 5 minutes. The guy's so busy, right? So it would have been amazing to have that recorded. And that's another thing I kind of look at, is going, what's the sustainability of what you're doing, the energy you're putting into these things.
Mm-hmm.
And content marketing can, but you need to have some way to capture, syndicate, and repurpose in some way. um, Last question here I want to dive into is the future. What is the future of content as you see it? Like, where do you see the ball moving, and where can you take us on? You've seen it all. You've seen the changes, and I think you have a real heartbeat on the trajectory of where the puck's going to be next, so to speak. Where do you think that's going to be?
Well, I've honestly never seen right now where we are. A lot of people are calling it the creator economy. I'm focusing on this thing called content entrepreneurs, whatever. It's this idea where you've got anyone, anywhere can develop an audience today. Is it hard to do? Is it difficult, challenging? Absolutely it is. But because you only need a smartphone today to build an audience, you've got some amazing software out there to help you. You're just going to see all these people from all over the world build these audiences, and they're more patient than enterprises. They just are, just because of the way enterprises are so quarterly focused. You're going to see more of these things happen from kids and boomers and Gen Xers with very little budget, more than you would on the marketing enterprise side where there's a budget. Okay, so I'm thinking about how this is happening. So what's the next big move? Enterprises want these things but can't do them for various reasons, so they start to acquire these audiences of these content entrepreneurs. We're starting to see it now. I mean, you've seen HubSpot buy The Hustle. My buddy, he doesn't want a public, but he had a podcast that was just purchased by another company. These things are happening right now. There's a lot of them in the works. So over the next 12, 18 months, 24 months, you're going to see huge acquisitions happen in this space, and that's going to continue. And then just from a content marketing standpoint, you don't have to do not every company will have a content marketing strategy, but I believe the most innovative, diversified companies will. Absolutely. Because that's where the growth is going to be. Because what we find out is if you can build a loyal audience that knows, likes, and trusts you, that purchasing power is substantially greater than someone that doesn't have a connection with you. We've seen that through Apple, right? We've seen it through Amazon. And everybody wants that. So how do you create loyalty when there is no loyalty today? Well, you have to deliver value that's not about your products and services on a regular basis. So that's kind of where I see it's going. Like the next 2 years, absolutely, you're going to see a lot of acquisitions. The next 5-10 years, the business model of a content or a media enterprise and a product and service company, you won't be able to tell the difference anymore, because they're all going to have audiences. They're all going to be building audiences, and they're all going to be monetizing those audiences in 7, 8, 9, 10 different ways. The most innovative companies in the world. And I love this idea because I don't have to have huge money up front if I've got patience. If I've got patience and grit and can say, look, the first 2-3 years, we can be minimalistic and we can do this thing and build an audience. And then you can see that hockey stick growth. Because, I mean, it's if you look at our years, 2007, 2008, 2009, we didn't have revenue of $100,000 in any of those years. Then it started to hit in 2010, right about when it should, 3-4 year mark. And then we saw hockey stick growth. And 2 years later, we were $10 million business. So how does that happen? It's a lot of patience. A lot of patience and focusing on the needs of the audience over you being at the cocktail party talking about how great your product is. So,
and that pattern has been repeated over and over again. It's just like patience, persistence, and quality content. What do you say to somebody who's listening to this and, they're going, hey, I want to be part of the, I feel like I could be a content entrepreneur, but I don't have the, the courage to do it because I believe my misperception, the story I'm telling myself anyways, is that it's already flooded. There's too many people out there doing it. What do you say to that person?
Well, there's been too much content since the dawn of the printing press. So how have all these other companies and individuals happen to be so successful? Spend some time up front. What is your skill or expertise area? Who's that audience that you might have something unique to say? That's where we talked about that whole section on the content tilt. You might have something to say in a way consistently over time that nobody else is doing. I mean, it took a lot of guts to go this whole content marketing direction, but I really did believe by calling it content marketing, we had an in. Because I really felt that was it. The data that I saw, when I talked to CMOs, I said, no, content marketing is it. It's the same way I feel right now about content entrepreneurs. Everybody's out there talking about the creator economy. And I'm talking to the team saying, people associate themselves with being a content entrepreneur. That actually means something to a good group of people. How many? It doesn't have to mean something to 5 million people. It only needs to mean something to about 10,000 people for us to really make it. when you put it at it that way, I'm like, they're already out there. They just have to find us. How are they going to find us? We're going to deliver value every day. And if we're patient to deliver value every day, we can do this thing. So my advice is, I'm not special. You're not special. We think we're special, but really, what's the difference is we focus on that differentiated area and then we deliver, just like Norm walking into Cheers every day. Norm, the great thing I love about Norm and that character is every day walked into Cheers bar consistently, never missed a day. And when he did, he always had something interesting to say. So to any content creators out there, you deliver consistently. And when you do, you deliver something interesting and valuable. And if you do that over time, it absolutely works. I just can't tell you whether it's going to be successful in 12 months, 18 months, or 24 months. But I feel that within that 3-year time period, if you do the work, you'll have a business model.
Amazing. And with that Norm one, would you be missed? That's a
Yes.
good test. So I went stealth. My podcast release, I think the last time I put one out was in March, and I've gone quiet. And that was a really good, energizing sense for me, because I'm getting a lot of people asking me, when am I coming out with season 3? And I was like, it's missed. That was for me a turning point for how much energy I'm putting into what I'm doing going forward. And I think that is a lesson I want to share with other people, is like, would you be missed if you went away? And you were missed when you went away. I mean, it was like a huge void. Like, no, I'm serious. Like, I
Thank you.
felt like when you went away, it was like there's it was a lot of empty air around content marketing that wasn't there, because you had such a good job leading it, you and your partner there.
Well,
So
I feel good about coming back and fighting the side hustle, the just this overworking thing. And I'm like, just no, it's not. Don't say that it's the hustle. It's the hustle. You got to outwork whatever. No, we're just gonna show up every day. That's all we're gonna do. And the ones that show up every day over a long period of time, it works. It works. And I just I just can't. I can't do all the excitement. It's like, that's fine. Those people are successful, I guess.
mhm.
But
They run out of
I don't
energy.
see it working that way. It doesn't work
Yeah,
that way for me.
that frantic energy doesn't, I don't think, serve you, and you run out of gas.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
thank you so much for being on the show. This is incredible. I've got a bonus question that I meant to squeeze in. I wanted just to add to it, which was, in the content creator. I noticed you have a creator coin, and
Yep.
I see that as being a really unique, new aspect of for content creators. Tell us about what your decision was to add that coin, what is it, and what do you think about things like this? Or is there other things that you anticipate that are going to be supporting content creators?
Well, thank you for the question revolves around my belief in decentralization of everything.
Mhm.
I believe that we're seeing, and I'm a big cryptocurrency guy. I believe in the decentralization of the financial markets. I believe that's the thing that's coming. It's just going to take a while. I'm betting the long game that that's going to continue to happen with Bitcoin and DeFi and those types of things. Okay, that's fine. Well, let's look at that on the content entrepreneur. And could a content entrepreneur create their own mini economy by putting out a currency? Like we have ours is called Tilt Coin from the Tilt. And so we launched it in March. And the belief is that, can you offer enough value while people will purchase your coin to get certain value, or to be a VIP, or to be a member, or to get content? Or will they then take that coin that they have and maybe give it to another member of the community, and maybe the community feels like we're building this thing together? So at worst, you're talking like loyalty miles, right? Like air miles type of thing. That's the at worst. At best, we could be creating an entirely new business model that I don't know what it's going to be. So my belief in decentralization is enough to feel that I want to give 100% into this and see if it works. And so far, the one thing I can say is people will just go, we've got some things like you can buy an autograph book from me, and we're launching our whole phase 2 of different membership models. If you hold 1 coin or 5 coins, you get different levels of membership. And we're just doing it, instead of an outside service, we're doing it all through the coin.
Mhm.
Um, where is this going to go? I don't know, but people feel that I'm talking to, they feel like they're more a part of the organization. They feel like it's partly theirs.
They're like
And
shareholders.
yes, it's not shareholders in theory, because it's not like we're not a public stock. I can't tell people, oh, invest, you're going to make money. Can't say that. But can I say that if you hold the coin, that you get benefits that other people don't have? Absolutely. So it's our responsibility. And what I love is they're giving me the ideas. I'm not coming up with all these myself. I'm asking them. I've got a whole group of people on Discord that are saying, oh, this is good, Joe, or this is not, or let's do this, or can you do this? And we're building this whole thing together. Where is it going to be in a year? I don't know, but I have a pretty good feeling that it's going to be something that I never would have thought was possible, because people really do feel more a part of this community because they have this creator coin. And so it's just a trend. And I'm seeing a lot of creators that, instead of having Twitch subs, instead of having YouTube subscribers and getting paid off of advertising, maybe this coin thing is something where the creator can actually generate revenue and profit and have a sustainable financial model. And at the same time, the community feels like they're a part of something special. I think that's the thing.
Boom. And I just joined your Discord group.
I saw that. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't even had a chance to say hi, but I will.
Yeah. I'm keenly watching that, and I'm a big fan of that. I want to get one of my own coins myself. So I've applied, but they haven't responded yet with any sort of interest.
Little backup. There's a lot of people that So, but you'll get
put in a good word for me.
Are you in with Rally?
Rally coin.
Okay. Yeah. Very good. I will.
Okay, well, thank you so much. This was amazing. I feel like we could probably go for 2 hours, and I'd love to invite you to come back again for another round. If you just want to share with people where they can find you, where can they find you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, our thing right now is thetilt.com. I mean, we have a 2-time a week email newsletter, goes out on Tuesdays and Fridays, and it's everything about content creation, content business models. We're really focused on the business model, revenue generation, audience building behind content and that model. So go to thetilt.com. And then for me, I'm at Joe Pulizzi pretty much everywhere on social. And my favorite is probably Twitter. If you want to get my attention, just DM me.
Awesome. Thank you again for being on the show. And thanks everyone for tuning in and listening. I normally end this with, thank you for the Groundswell Marketing Podcast, but actually this changed. It's now Groundswell Origins. I've changed my name. And if you go to groundswellorigins.com, if you want to leave a comment for me, just hit the mic under podcast and let me know what you think. Let me know who you'd like me to interview and topics you'd like to discuss. I'd be happy to hear from you. And until next time, mahalo.